Okay, now we want to continue our review for the Unit 4 lecture exam for Introduction to Geology. And we just got finished with rivers, and now we want to do Lesson 15 on the oceans and coastlines. So you want to check with your instructor to find out if this material is going to be on the exam. So I'm going to go ahead and lecture over it as though it is going to be on the exam. So make sure and go through these lesson objectives, and that's going to give you a good idea for what would be on the exam. And then this is chapter 15 out of your textbook. And then there are 2 episodes of Earth Revealed that would be very good to watch. So what does the ocean floor look like? So this should be a review, because when we talked about plate tectonics, you should be familiar with those things that go down the center of the Atlantic Ocean. So that's a mid-ocean ridge where the plates are being pulled apart and it's making new ocean floor. And then you should also recognize over there in the Western Pacific those trenches, and so that was caused by subduction, where one plate was going underneath the other plate and it was making one of those trenches. So this should just be a review that we're reviewing here. Okay, you should know these words for the exam. So you should know what the Continental Shelf is, and you should have a rough idea for how deep the Continental Shelf is. So it is going to be the shallowest part of the ocean. It's the part of the ocean that has sloshed up onto the continent. So that you had Continental Lithosphere, which is topographically higher than the ocean floor over here. And so if the water is on top of the continental plate, then we're going to call that the Continental Shelf. Okay, then where the material is dropping off of the Continental Shelf, that's the Continental Slope, and then that debris then continues to move down to the floor of the ocean, and it makes the Continental Rise. So I could ask you on the exam which part of the ocean is the deepest, and then which part of the ocean is the shallowest. And I also could ask you which part of the ocean is the steepest. And so you can see from that that the Continental Slope is 3 degrees, and so that's pretty steep. Now that is greatly exaggerated, because you know if you take a protractor and you make a 3-degree angle, well, that's not much, but it is when you compare that to 0.1 degrees. Okay, you should know what the abyssal plains are. You should know what the abyssal hills are. You should know what mid-ocean ridges are. You should know what the rises are. Could you make a picture? So could you make a cross-sectional picture of a hypothetical ocean floor and then label all of these structures on it? Okay, then the trenches, and then the faults that go across those mid-ocean ridges. So those are the faults. Okay, then some more vocabulary. So you should know, how does a reef form, how does an atoll form, and then how does a guyot form, and then how does a seamount form. Okay, then what is an ocean plateau? So just more vocabulary that you would need to know for the exam. All right, now this is review, because you already know what the ocean floor is like. So the ocean floor is gabbro at depth, and then on the surface of the ocean floor is going to be pillow basalts, and then the whole thing is cracked with dikes. And so all of this is a result of a mid-ocean ridge. So this is where the ocean floor comes from in the first place, and it forms all of these different structures. But now this is new. So you should have an idea for some of the sediments that cover the ocean floor, so that you have biochemical sediments. So that bio means life. So this would be materials that animals pull out of the water. They use it to make their shells, and then when they die, those shells accumulate on the bottom of the ocean floor as biochemical sediments. Now there's two different kinds of shells. You have shells that are made of calcite, and then shells that are made of quartz. So you're not responsible for knowing the names of the organisms that produce it, but you should know that there are two different kinds of sediments: calcite sediments and then quartz sediments. Okay, then you got clay, and since clay is so very fine, it can get into the deepest parts of the oceans. It can go very, very far out away from the continents, and then it settles down. So the deepest parts of the ocean are covered in clay. Then you also have precipitates. You can have calcite can be precipitated on the ocean floor to make limestone. You can have gypsum. You can have these iron manganese nodules. And then detrital is going to be rocks and pebbles and sand that washes out to sea. You can have volcanic materials. You can have glacier materials. So glaciers can push materials out into the ocean. And then asteroids and meteorites can also hit the ocean and be deposited on the floor. Okay, so let's take a break, and when we come back, let's talk about the tides.